Good afternoon, and welcome to today's virtual conversation about recent university climate survey and a discussion on how we can work together towards building a more inclusive UCF. My name is Kent Butler, and I am the Interim Chief Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Officer, and I appreciate you all being here with us today. I will be the facilitator today of this conversation, which I hope will be a time for us to elevate each other's voices candidly and to talk about what our lives have been here on this college campus, to share our experiences. In some respects, this is a continuation of the virtual conversation we had on race and culture and unity back in June. And it's a space for us to share thoughts, provide comfort and support, and be there for one another. Our initial focus will be talking about the results of the campus climate survey that the members of the community have taken earlier this year. Then I would like for us to share our reactions to the survey, starting with several members of ODI's Leadership Council for Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity. After that, we will open up the conversation to you all to provide an opportunity for those who either did not participate in the survey or have additional experiences that they would like to share. We want and need to hear from everyone to build a better UCF. Your thoughts, your ideas, questions will help to inform the work that we are doing to formalize a university and a university plan that is going to lead us into working through some of the issues that have come through. Earlier this summer, President Cartwright announced the creation of this plan, an action plan. And this work that we're doing today is one of the first steps in that process. I'd like to introduce to you all some of the faces that you're going to see on the screen today and have you meet some of our leadership council. This group has come together to bring to the university just the thoughts and the processes from various areas of campus and how we can all improve diversity and inclusion in all our efforts. And so today we have Dr. Leanne Roberts. She's the Interim Director of Diversity and Inclusion in the College of Engineering and Computer Science. We also have Dr. Devin Jensen. He's the Associate Dean of College of Graduate Studies. Dr. Jeff Jones is the Vice Provost for UCF Connect and UCF Global. Commander Pablo Vargas is on the university's Police Department. Ms. Stephanie G. Blanco is our Student Body Vice President. Dr. Jenna Jasinski, Vice Provost for Faculty Excellence and Pegasus Professor of Sociology. And last but not least, Dr. Fernando Rivera, Professor of Sociology and Director of the Puerto Rico Research Hub. We also are going to be joined today by Pat Lancey, Assistant Vice President for Operational Excellence and Assessment Support, and Uday Nair, OES's Director. Together, they help to kind of bring this data to life. So the analysis that you are seeing, that you have read in the report, are courtesy of them, and can't be more proud of the efforts that they have put forward in doing this work. As you're listening today, President Alexander Cartwright and Interim Provost Michael Johnson will be a part of this discussion. Yeah, we'll be listening in. So without any further ado, well, I guess there is some further ado. Let me also share with you all that we're trying to be equitable in all the voices today. And so we know that we're limited on time. And so we want to make sure that all voices are heard and that we're respectful of those voices that are coming in. So we're looking for people to be at least 2 to 3 minutes in their comments. So try to be mindful of that as you're sharing today. The other part is that we want to acknowledge that the events that that were targeting us today, these hateful types of speech and individuals who are being racist and biased and having crude remarks, we're not immune to that. And so we may have someone who pops in and says something. So we're going to do our best to kind of mitigate any issues that come along those lines. But should that happen, just know that we're going to be very mindful and try to take that down as soon as possible. To everyone listening and watching on Zoom, please remember, if you want to say something, you can raise your hand. There's a feature there for you to be able to do that, to share or to give remarks. And we will work to turn on your camera and your microphone so you can be heard by the other individuals who are watching. On Zoom, there's also a question and answer feature at the bottom. So please use that to ask any questions, and we will share them with the listeners as we go through. If you do have questions, you can also designate who that question might be for. If you note the upvote option, there's also a part that you can do with that as well. And so if you see a vote or see a question that you really like, you can upvote that, and it'll probably up the chances for that question being answered during this hour and a half. We are simulcasting through UCF's YouTube channel. And if you are hearing of anybody who's having trouble with the Zoom, please direct them to that particular page. They can find that through the UCF events link at events.ucf.edu. So without any further ado, let me go into the PowerPoint itself. So I'm going to be sharing my screen here for a moment. And if you all bear with me, we will get the party started, so to speak. If I can get confirmation that you all see that. Excellent. So as we, well, let me do one more thing. So we want to build a very exclusive community, and I'm going to also take down the pictures that are in my way so that it doesn't blur for you all. I've heard that that happens. Okay, so as you know, back in the spring semester, we put together a climate survey for the campus to take. We wanted to make sure that all aspects of diversity and inclusion were being kind of listened to. There have been comments in the past about there needing to be a sense of what the university was about. And we kept hearing about these things happening, but there weren't any real measures that were put forward in the recent past in terms of doing that. And so we wanted to put this out there for folks to be able to see. The university contracted with a national group called the Viewfinders Campus Climate Surveys to help develop and conduct the survey. The Viewfinder was created by Insight into Diversity magazine and is used at universities across the country. As a matter of fact, we are a HEED award winner from this particular company. And the survey measured a few broad categories such as overall climate at UCF, how welcoming UCF is, work or learning experiences, personal experiences of discrimination, bias, and harassment, campus diversity plan, and safety on campus. We heard from across the campus, but not all voices. And we want to be very apparent about that. That one of the reasons we are hosting these events today is because we really want to engage with all individuals. About 16% of faculty, 23% of our staff, and just under 2% of our students participated. One of the things that we know happened during this time is that we were just on the cusp of bringing in a brand new president. We were heading into spring break, and we were also dealing with a pandemic that was starting up, and we went to remote learning. And so I think that a lot of attention was put on other things, and this survey was not necessarily the top thing on everyone's agenda. We wanted to also recognize that we collected this information just to really move this needle. And we had a time frame for what we wanted to do with this. And we recognized that we had to do this even though we were experiencing these things, but we wanted to make sure that we had something that we can utilize to move this narrative forward. So we're grateful for those who did provide responses. While the numbers of individuals who took the survey are important, more important are the narrative that came from this. As President Cartwright has said, becoming more inclusive requires us to be honest and to be about understanding where the institution is and where we need to go and what the work is that we have to do. You don't get better unless you hold yourself up to a mirror and take a hard look at all of these challenges. So one of the things I just want to bring to your attention is the creed. We have to recognize that the creed is UCF's symbol of who we are and what we stand for. And I want to draw your attention to community. And in community, it talks about us recognizing and being as open and supportive in this campus environment and respecting every individual. And that is really what this has been all about, is that we want to find ways that all people can feel as though they have been respected and that they belong, they are being valued on this university campus. So the overall climate for faculty and staff, if you look at this, you'll see that most of the things that were going on for the faculty was that the university is a very positive place for individuals. So our interactions with ourselves as employees on this campus was really a powerful thing. So if you look at the percentages there, most people feel that this is a good place to work. I would recommend my campus to others to consider. That was also pretty high in terms of that. So I want to encourage you all to read through the full report, which can also access from diversity.ucf.edu. And what you will find in there is more data that talks about the demographics, the characteristics of the respondents, the analysis of the team, and an OEAS support. And so this will give you an opportunity to kind of see more of that. I want to start with the next few slides on the overall climate from which we can kind of look at some of these things. So the other part that I would like to talk to you all about is how the overall climate has been for the faculty and the staff. All personnel are held to the same code of professional ethics and conduct. And the things that we see here is that there were a strong disagreement with this statement for 46% of the people from the faculty and from the staff. And so we have to kind of look at those numbers and find out what that means and where that's coming from. We also see that same kind of a sense of people who don't agree with this statement of leaders are held to measures of accountability, responsibility for campus climate. And so there's a disagreement in that leaders are actually doing those types of things. So what I want to draw your attention to is looking down at the latter part of this slide and where it talks about the faculty administrators and the staff members when it comes to their gender and it comes to the years of employment and whether or not they're an employee of color. So while there has been some that have talked about how great their experiences have been at this campus, we have to also kind of pay attention to it with regards to how gender is being seen or experiencing these things and how employees of color are seeing that. And just the years that they have been at the university are also important to kind of recognize. If you will see that when it comes to all personnel are held to the same code of professional ethics and conduct, what you see is that it doesn't really say the same for individuals. So you have 24% of people of color feeling this way, and not people who are not of color are at 38%. And so these are kind of how you'll read through this data and these data points here. The next slide also talks about our school in terms of how much emphasis it puts on diversity. And I want to talk a little bit about that. The slide echoes some of the work that we need to do and what I would like to do in my role and some of the things that I learned when I was a faculty fellow for inclusive excellence when it comes to some of the discrepancies that people were feeling about how they were being treated on this campus, including the concerns that their work just wasn't being valued. These findings are very similar to what we've heard when we've hosted faculty focus groups last year on some of the same topics, as well as results of the last coach survey among faculty. What else do we want to add from your work? Fewer than 40% of the respondents felt that their contributions to campus diversity had been recognized. And you can see this in the question that talks about could add, where folks were coming in and saying that I don't necessarily recognize what my work has been focused on throughout the university community, and that there are individuals who actually do not necessarily believe that I have a research agenda that should be supported. And so that is really problematic. For a more detailed table with this listing of questions and overall climate, as well as a breakdown of the respondent groups and their standard deviations above or below the means, I encourage you to look fully at the faculty and staff comparison report that we have posted on our website. For students, the next two slides, I will cover some of the student responses. And though our rates for students was a little low, I want you to point out that this was basically because we did not have the ability to get to the students, especially when they were on spring break. And so we are not going to generalize this data, but we understand that there's a need for us to kind of continue to tap into the students and to hear from them. And that's one of the reasons why I would like to start a advisory group for students, that we could talk about some of these things over the course of the semester and continually hear from them and have their voices heard. The next two slides cover, and I'm so off on my sheet here, and I apologize. So the courses that I've taken actively foster appreciation for diversity. We find that 56% of the students who took this feel as though that is the case. And so we want to really pay attention to the fact that 16% and 21% either strongly disagreed or they didn't know. And so we want to really kind of dig deeper into what that means and how we can kind of make sure that the courses that the students are taking do foster these things. The process by which my voice can be heard is effective. This was something that we felt was very telling in terms of there are students who are not feeling as though their voices are being heard, and that we have to figure out new processes for ways of putting together a chain that allows for things that are happening like misconduct or things that are happening in the classroom to be more realized and action taken upon them. Leaders are held to appropriate measures of accountability and responsibility. For the most part, students didn't know if leaders were being held accountable. And so we want to make sure that that is something that we address as well. Is multiculturalism a core value of our institution? What we're finding is that 65% of the university feels that's so. And so while that is strong, we also have to tap into whether or not we understand what's happening with those who don't believe that or don't see that as happening or don't understand or don't know that that's happening. Our school puts too much emphasis on diversity. 22% of the university community of students who took this felt that it did. And 57% felt that we did not put enough, that we did have maybe just the right amount of diversity that was going on our community. So this is a slide that talks about welcome perceptions, and it also kind of gives us the opportunity to kind of understand from the perspective of everyone who took the instrument of what's going on. So our survey also found that UCF is perceived by our employees and our students to be more welcoming to certain groups compared to others. And so as you take a look at this, you'll see that there are some people who do not feel as welcome. African Americans and people with disabilities having some really interesting results that we need to be mindful of and pay attention to. negative experiences. So on this particular slide, I would like to draw your attention to the very top line, which talks about any discrimination or bias that's happening in our community. 55% of the people who are in the faculty who took the survey, and 50% of the staff felt as though there have been bias. And so if you look at the right column, and it talks about gender and race and things along those lines, you can see the statistics that fell out of the survey that talks about how gender felt about discrimination and bias, how people from different racial ethnic groups felt about it, and by age, and things along those lines. And so it was really telling that that people were feeling though that there was discrimination. And so we need to dig deeper into what that is and what that feels like for them and what they would like to share about those experiences. So within the negative experiences, one of the things that we wanted to know for the students was, did they actually witness it, and what was going on for them? And so 54% of the students have not witnessed or experienced an act of discrimination or bias. And so it's really interesting to figure out what was going on with the other percentage of students who may have. And of those who did witness or experience acts of discrimination and bias, the reasons they shared were also noted. And so they say that it wasn't important enough, 54%. Not sure if anything would happen, 46%. So we have to kind of take that into consideration and understand, why is it that students feel that they cannot have their voices heard and have things be taken into consideration. And so, then it starts to go lower and lower in terms of that. But when you see that 17% of the students feared retaliation, that becomes a very problematic situation, and that anyone will feel that because they are saying something or they're paying their money to be educated here, that they will be retaliated against, whether it be their grades or maybe their future employment, that is problematic, that anyone feels that way. And so those are some of the numbers that we need to kind of pay attention to as well. So the last slide I would share with you is that I want to have more of an intimate conversation with staff, faculty, and students in the future, where we can just kind of have a conversation around what was going on with regards to the survey, and also what's happening in life and how we can move the narrative forward. We're looking at creating an action plan, as was noted earlier. And with this action plan, we need to hear from everyone as to what is it that University of Central Florida stands for, and how are we going to move forward in regards to that. And so it becomes really important for us to kind of come and be a part of these conversations, so that we can do the work that needs to happen in order to make change, and make great change on our college campus. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I want to come to the members of the Leadership Council who are on board, and just ask, what is your takeaway from you putting a lot of work into this survey? What is your takeaway with regards to some of the information that you saw on the survey and the results that came back? And I wonder if I should ask someone in particular.
Ken, let me weigh in if I may.
Sure.
Excuse me, Jeff Jones here. A couple big picture items here. One is, first of all, we all need to acknowledge, look each other in the eye and say we have a tremendous opportunity for improvement. That there's nothing here that should be considered a pat on the back. Obviously, there are some indications that some areas are less troublesome than others. But clearly, we have a great opportunity for improvement in many, many of these areas. The second thing is, I think we ought to all acknowledge that a limitation of any kind of survey like this is the attempt to put people into some sort of a category, or responses in categorical responses. That's very difficult to do. I think most of us have to recognize that, there's a tremendous amount of intersectionality among our colleagues and our fellow workers, our students, and that we really need to acknowledge that in all cases, the effects of these behaviors has to be judged at the individual level. And that any attempt to really try to categorize them otherwise is, it's difficult, but it is what it is. It's a survey mechanism, and I appreciate the work that's gone into it, but thank you for letting me weigh in.
So, Jenna.
So Kent, I'd like to weigh in. What really stands out for me in this is that this is one survey, but we also have other surveys as well as focus groups that you yourself conducted, but they all have the same theme. And the same theme for me is that we have a community in which some individuals don't feel like they belong to this community, don't feel valued by this community. And that's really significant because being a part of a group really is a key to feeling valued and successful and supported. And if that's not something that all our community members feel, that's a challenge we need to really face head on. The other thing I think that stands out for me is that this survey, as well as some others that have recently been presented, really speak to the fact that not everyone feels that their voice is heard in the same way. And that's something I think we should work on as a community, is finding a way to make sure everyone knows how they can have their voice heard and actually have it heard and have impact of that voice.
Right. Dr. Roberts.
All right, so I share some of the same sentiments as my colleagues, and I have two takeaways that I would like to share with everyone today. One of my first takeaways from reviewing the campus climate survey was the simple fact that the methodology that was selected for this assessment was primarily quantitative in nature. So as I was reviewing the information, as you also stated, Dr. Butler, it was in some ways complicated for me to really get an in-depth comprehension into the perceptions, experiences, and emotions of the survey respondents. So in my opinion, I believe that these virtual conversations are necessary simply in our roles on the Leadership Council for Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity to actually fine-tune those narratives and develop a dynamic action plan. My next thoughts too, on that same note also, is that I felt like the campus climate survey also validated my perception that there are areas that UCF is progressive in as it relates to the field of diversity and inclusion. As you mentioned in your PowerPoint presentation, over 70% of faculty, administrators, and staff members stated that they would recommend UCF to others who are considering working here. In addition, I also recall you mentioning that more than 3 in 4 respondents actually believe that diversity and inclusion is somewhat or very important to our campus leadership. That speaks volumes. I believe that at times we have a tendency to focus on our challenges rather being cognizant, I believe, of our strengths. So in my opinion, I believe it's vital for us to identify and solidify our strengths while collaboratively acknowledging and addressing our challenges. So those are my takeaways from this whole experience in reviewing this.
Great, thank you. Stephanie, what are your thoughts?
Definitely, I agree with everyone in this panel for sure. Seeing the statistics for students, I know a lot of students didn't have the chance to fill out the survey, but I know, we cannot deny the fact that there are students hurting in our community. There are students that are being discriminated, are hurting, and they don't feel it as if they belong here. And that's something that I think we need to address, something that we really need to create an action plan. And I believe that having these continuous conversations and more on a student level, I think will definitely be beneficial. So we definitely urge all the students to be a part of those, and we'd love to hear their stories.
Excellent, thank you. One of the things that Stephanie and I are working on is creating an ambassador program of students who are going to be a part of this initiative. And we're sitting down, Stephanie, and we have 2 other students who are a part of the Leadership Council who are going to kind of communicate with me of the best way to kind of put this into action. And this ambassador program will be students who are going to be able to share their voices about what they see happening on campus. But at the same time, we're going to be training them to go out and have the difficult dialogues that are necessary around race and culture and things along those lines, so that we can kind of really get a clear sense and really start to work with the community on how to kind of address all these issues and be better with regards to how we live our life on this campus. Dr. Jensen, anything from you?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Butler. It's great to be here today. And I just wanted to share a couple of my thoughts related to the campus climate survey, and two kind of standout points. One actually from the campus climate survey, and then one that kind of discusses a little bit about the background story that's happened as we've reviewed, as a leadership council reviewed this climate survey. The first thing is that, to me, one thing that really stood out was the need for infrastructure. I think when I looked at a lot of the different elements addressed in kind of the holistic picture of the respondents, looking at this need to have an infrastructure in place to help us with the overall climate, and then especially as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion here at UCF. So I really see that need for infrastructure, and that kind of came out in one of the comments that were made in one of the questions, where the respondent said, 60% of the people said we need something happening at the college level, but we also need centralized leadership to help guide that. And I know that, in the discussions that we've had, and, we see that really starting happening. And the appointment of Dr. Butler as a kind of our chief interim officer over diversity, equity, inclusion is kind of a beginning point to that. And I see bigger things happening as it related to bringing a centralized presence around this. Then that will help us to have more meaning and purpose behind the things that we are doing. There's a lot of good things that you can do, but we can't do every good thing. And so you have to learn to be able to make decisions about what is appropriate for UCF, what is the direction we need to go. And I think that centralized office and a more solid infrastructure will help that happen. The second thing that I wanted to talk just a little bit about is some of the things that's happened in the background of it. As we've looked at the data that's come in and the statistics that come in from the survey, I want this community to realize that we have been looking at all sides of the equation. It's not just a matter of looking at it and say, oh, 80% of the people said it's a welcoming campus. And then, okay, we're good to go on that one. We don't need to worry about that one. But we've had meaningful discussions about the 20% that have maybe not felt it was welcoming, or even the 1% in a particular metric that said, I'm struggling with this, I feel I'm being bullied, whatever the case may be. We're paying attention to both the positive and the negative side of the equation. The positive is helping us to make decisions about the strong points that we have and how we can continue to grow and progress there. But the negative elements, the lower metrics, are helping us to make decisions about this is an important element that we need to address and make some serious decisions about how we need to move forward with some of these more sensitive issues that maybe we're not addressing at this point in time. So those are just some of the two standout elements that I saw.
Thank you so much. Before we move on, I just wanted to just let everyone know that if you are interested in speaking out or saying something, please raise your hand and we'll get you set up to be a part of the discussion. Dr. Fernando Rivera.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. I think, there's never going to be a perfect survey. There's never going to be a perfect poll. But for me, this reaffirms the suspicions that I had being at UCF for 15 years. Things that I've experienced, things that I've seen happen to my students, things that staff have shared with me. And I think a lot of people here in this panel today and our attendees also feel that way. So I think it's a step forward, just realizing that, that it's happening. It's not in somebody's imagination that these issues are happening. And now the question, what we're asking people is, how do we move on? How do we move on and how do we change this? And I think this is a key step in truly being diverse, in truly being inclusive, in all that we do. So thank you so much. I look forward to what the panelists have to say and the rest of the audience.
Just very quickly, again, if you feel like you want to share a part of this, please go ahead and do that. So I have a question for you all that was in the Q&A. It says, if leadership is always moderating events such as these and faculty and staff already don't feel like it's a safe environment, how is this creating a safe space for honest discussion? People are scared to be honest and say exactly what they feel for fear it will negatively impact their jobs or opportunity for advancement. No one wants to be reviewed or be viewed as being negative. So what are your thoughts with regards to that, especially when you think about the number of individuals who have taken the survey?
I'll just weigh in on here. I believe that individuals' participation in this virtual conversation is important for them to first get the information and to get a clear understanding as to where we are coming from with the results of that. If they are uncomfortable with talking publicly about these different items, then they can definitely talk privately, which is why we're here mentioning who we are, what we do, and we can have those conversations in confidentiality. At least you know who to reach out to about the important facts. So I don't want anybody feeling uncomfortable. I completely understand. I have been there many, many, many times, but we're still open to talk to you. And so we understand retaliation, but there's also protection from that as well with UCF. So just feel free to say how you feel publicly or privately. That's my thoughts.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, Dr. Butler, I just wanted to share my thoughts. One kind of motto that I like to use in my life is seek first to understand and then to be understood. And this forum is an opportunity to provide all of us an opportunity to understand. And then building on what Dr. Roberts said, then there are other opportunities. Maybe it's in this forum that you can come forward to be understood, but maybe it's in a more private or intimate setting where you can find an opportunity to be understood about your situation. And so I think to me that's a valuable way to look at this particular situation that we're experiencing right now in this particular forum.
Great, great. So there's a question that came up with regards to the representation of folks who are here. I will share with you that the representation right now are people who are part of the Leadership Council who have been feeding into me how to move forward with this. And so again, just as it was stated earlier, we're not always going to get everything right. We're not going to be able to invite every single last person. But one of the things that we do have at our command is that we are trying to have these conversations as much as possible. The staff meeting is coming up really soon, and we would hope that you'll come and be a part of that. We do have representation that will be at that meeting as well, but this full meeting really was to hear from everyone else, not to hear from the panel. We really want to hear from those who are in the community and kind of help us again with the action plan and the strategy for working through that action plan moving forward. I see that Commander Pablo Vargas has come back on, and so I'll give him an opportunity to answer maybe what was his takeaway or some of his takeaways from the survey.
Well, I just want to address that, one of those points, Kent, is these are crucial conversations, and that's what I call them. These are crucial conversations that absolutely need to happen. And I'm excited to be part of this council. I'm excited as a police officer, for the UCF Police Department and as a previous student of this university, to be part of a leadership council like this, where I get to be amongst, all of you guys sharing these ideas, listening. And the biggest thing I took from this is just perspective. As a police officer here for the past 15 years, being part of the study and this leadership council has given me a lot of perspective. And I just want to say I appreciate that from each and every one of you.
Great. So there's another question that was in the chat and or the Q&A, and it says, the survey alluded to the fact that the USPS employees are unhappy and it felt like it was a footnote. Can we talk about that? This person says that they are a USPS classification and they know many of them are unhappy. I'm unhappy. We're overworked, underpaid, overshadowed, or downright ignored by many in the upper classifications, not to say other members of the community are not. Thoughts? And that's very real, and so that is really a part of the reason why we're here and why we're allowing this kind of opportunity to be put forth. And we don't want this to fall on dead ears. That's one of the reasons why we have President Cartwright on today, and we have Provost Johnson on today, so that we can kind of hear from our individuals in the community. For too long, we're hearing that, oh, this has been going on and nobody knew about it, or it didn't get to the right people. And what we're saying right now is we're opening up the door for it to get to the right people. Because I do not personally want to hear anyone tell me that they were too afraid to come forward because of retaliation. And so my email and my ability to speak with you and to be open for you is here. I want to be that bridge that can kind of fill that gap in for those who feel that they don't have that voice. I'm willing to take that and fall on that sword, because it is important for all of us that we all feel comfortable and we feel that we need to be here. And so it's really important for that. And so I will always have my door open to anyone who has any type of thoughts or feelings. And that it means me helping you to go to the right individuals to make something happen, then that's what it will have to take. But it's, the fact of the matter is, maybe that wasn't communicated before, but now it is. And we're not going to stand for people feeling as though this community is not a place for them to be. Others who would like to share. And no one is sharing.
I can share something, Dr. Butler.
Thank you.
In response to the question that you just raised here, I think it's an important question. You know, I in my role as Associate Dean of the College of Graduate Studies, a lot of my effort is focused on the diversity of our students and making sure that those diverse students who come to UCF have opportunities to have experience with a diverse faculty. And so that tends to be the real dominant lens that we look at the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion at UCF. But I want, you know, this group that are here today to kind of really know that as a leadership council, and especially as Dr. Butler, we have tried to really make conscious efforts to expand that notion of the communities that we want to be responsive to. So it's not just about students, it's not just about faculty, but it's also about the larger community that's here, everybody that's here and contributing to the overall experience here at UCF. Everyone plays an integral role in the success of the institution. And so we want to make sure that everybody feels that, and I think you said that at the beginning, Dr. Butler, that everybody feels valued and respected and are part of this community. And I think right now we're making those efforts to make sure that in the entirety of that community is being considered and the appropriate attention is given to the needs of those different elements within the community.
And I think that's what accountability is, right? We have to also be accountable to one another to make sure that these things are not happening to members of our community. If we hear all the time that, students and others saying, oh, I love UCF, I love UCF, and they have great pride in the university. And so it's really saddening to hear that there are people who don't love UCF, right? Because, that's what we say we are. This is who we are. And everybody should have a stake in this claim. But, you can't have a stake in this claim if your boss is doing things that make you feel like you're being belittled, or if others are doing things that make you feel unwelcome. And so that's what needs to change. And that's what this conversation is about. And this is not about giving lip service to it. It's about really now taking it to the next step and really making sure that people feel safe in this environment. Others, anyone else would like to chime in?
Can I just say, Kent, this is the first broad climate survey we've done in 20 years. And that's a problem. First of all, we had 20 years to do it. But now that we have it, having open forums like this, hearing the voices is exceptionally important. The only way we can actually move forward as a campus is to hear everyone's voice, understand where there are challenges, where are there places we need to improve, as well as Dr. Roberts mentioned earlier, our areas of strength. And I think the survey, as imperfect as it is a good place to start to really understand some of that and hear some of those voices. And if we need to do more of that, so people feel comfortable in a safe space, being anonymous, then we should do more of that. I think that's really important.
And I think that's it too, right? On top of having these conversations, we also have to see things happen and change, right? So many times people have had these conversations and we'll hear that. We'll hear people saying, we talked about this before. I talked about this till I'm blue in the face, right? Well, you may not be able to see that in my face, but you know that we've talked about this. And so what we have to do now is put it into action. That's what this action plan is for. And so that's about the accountability, right? So you have to hold me accountable. You have to hold everyone who's on this panel accountable. You have to hold President Cartwright accountable and Provost Johnson accountable for the things that we want and that we say that we need to have. And And again, we're opening up the pathway for you to not feel as though it's going to come back to bite you. We don't want that. And so if we're telling you this is what we want to give you, we're hoping that you will receive that and that we can then take this good work and make it work for all of us. Any other thoughts?
Kent, this is Pablo. Again, you and I have had talked about this plenty of times, but now that the climate survey is done and we heard the voices, what I'm really excited about is what's next. And let's get to work. Let's start doing our jobs. Let's start making a difference. Enough talking, right? And let's do it. So that's just my personal excitement about being part of this this group is doing the what's next part, and let's do our jobs. So thank you for that, Kent. Okay.
Do we have a speaker? I'm kind of lost in the chat here, just like I was lost in my notes a little while ago. Is there a speaker? If not, let me go to the next question. Joseph Myerson. Yes, Joseph Myerson, where are you?
I'm here, Doctor. My apologies for accidentally turning my camera and microphone on too early before.
Oh, that's okay.
Sir, it's just, I'm just a cog in our most excellent wheel, and I've been delighted and proud to be a part of UCF since 2008. But I have to say, we, as a university, we are a lot less diverse than the state of Florida. And I wasn't really cognizant about that until I started becoming more involved in some of the diversity and inclusion stuff that we are blessed to have. So I'll just say that as near as I've been told, and I may have been told wrong, so if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I've been told that we are 87% male and white in our faculty. And I think that there's a lot more than, 13% of the state that isn't male and isn't white. And I sincerely believe that we would benefit profoundly by doing everything we possibly can to not only make the folks that are already here and part of our community feel welcome and valued and listened to, but to actively, vigorously, aggressively, and powerfully do everything we can to make ourselves more accurately reflect, at the very least, the state of Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I have to say, except thank you all very much for your kindness, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's really important point that you're making with regards to how we as a university start to look at what our composition is. And also to not make that threatening to those who are here, right? That's what the purpose of our conversation is about, is how do we improve?
It's an addition and multiplication problem, sir, not a division and subtraction one, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so, yes, we are moving in that direction, right? And recognizing what implicit biases have come up when we are hiring new people. What happens when we see things happening in the community that don't necessarily reflect our own values and the way that we see the world, right? And start to really understand how we can start to take in other people's life narratives. And you don't have to agree with everything that someone does or what people believe in, but you do have to respect them. And part of respect is to have that conversation, to have an understanding, knowing how to unlearn all these things that have come up in our lives through life, right? There are a lot of things that have come up in our lives that make us see people for who we think they are without giving them the opportunities for them to show who they are, right? And so that's why we point our finger at this particular population or that particular population. That's the problem child, or that's the interesting individual over there, without really pointing inward and doing some self-reflecting as to why we feel that way. And why we don't give people the respect that they deserve, because we see them as different. And so that is really an important point for us to kind of remember to do. Let me see if there's another question. Before I go to another question, I would like to see if anybody would like to respond to what our guests have just shared.
Actually, Dr. Butler, could I respond? First, I want to thank you very much, Mr. Myerson, for sharing that. This is part of what I focus on as the Vice Provost for Faculty Excellence. And I will tell you, I'm thrilled that we have significant support from our president and our provost to really look at how we are hiring our faculty and really change the way we're doing that so we can be more inclusive in our hiring practices. And that's an action step we're taking right now. Dr. Butler was an Inclusive Excellence Faculty Fellow in Faculty Excellence, and Dr. Jennifer Sandoval is one now, and she's really looking at how we hire, developing a toolkit for our processes. So we're actively working on that right now. So thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you. Any others? All right, I'm still looking through the chat here. Hold on one second, I'm sorry. So our next question is, I have been in a situation where a fellow staff member made very sexist and racist comments, and my boss didn't speak up against it. It made me feel very uncomfortable. What should I do next time that happens? Thoughts, questions? Thoughts or to this question, I should say. Okay, I'll tackle it first. What I will say is, so we have the integrity line, and we have other things that are available to folks to kind of come and talk about it. We have the ombudsman. We have so many different entities that are on campus. I think you have to find somebody that you trust, because right now we understand that everybody doesn't trust everything, or we are still at, at bay as to whether or not this is even the process for us to go through, right? And so we have to build that trust. And so in order for us to gain your trust in us, we have to continue to do the things that are going to be supportive of you when you are coming up against these types of issues. And so when somebody is being sexist towards you or being racist towards you, then I'm opening my door. I'm asking you to come to me and have me be that person that will go and be able to talk and bring that case to bear. And also, I think part of that exposure also keeps people safe as well, right? Because I think that there's this misnomer that if I open my mouth or I say something, I'm going to be the target and I'm going to get out. Well, and in most cases, that brings more attention to the issue at hand, and the university would be in a really bad state of affairs if they were to let go or have retaliation towards a person who is trying to save themselves from this type of treatment. And so I think it's really important for us to kind of be each other's back and support. And so I know that for me, I am able to do that. I know that there are different entities on campus that people can go to. And if you don't feel that that's the best way to go about it, and then to use the integrity line to kind of move that issue forward. But I do know that our attention is on that now. I know we are looking for these patterns, and we are understanding that this is happening to individuals. And so we're doing our best to make sure that we can kind of change the direction of that, and to get people to recognize that it's not appropriate for you to have racist behavior. It's not appropriate for you to have sexist behavior. It's not appropriate for you to look at one person or another person and feel as though you have control over them and you have the privilege to do whatever you want to their lives when they have just as much right to be here as you do. Any other thoughts?
Kent, I'll just share one quick thought related to that particular question. Right now, we're going through a lot of new student orientations and new grad student orientations, and I've been trying to attend many of the program level orientations. And one of the things that we tell new grad students is that if you have a question, you don't know where to go, come to the College of Graduate Studies. We know where all the resources are, and we can point you in the right direction. We might be able to help you, or we'll say, go see this person or go to this office, and they'll be able to provide the support that you need. If you're facing an HR issue, such as the one that's presented, you can always turn to HR. Most colleges have an HR director or an officer that represents that particular college. Certainly go to the HR department and say, here's what I'm experiencing. What do I do? How do I handle it? And they'll provide you with the correct and accurate information on what you need to do to handle that situation that you're experiencing.
Right. And it's really important to do that. It's really important to get your support from those who are in the position to do that. That's why we're here. And so you're really putting somebody's in the ability to do their job, right? It's their job of the people in HR. It's the job of the folks who are in OIE and others to do this work. And so we have to rely on them doing their job and making them be accountable for doing that. So the next question is, a number of us are aware that administration is not held to the same accountability as faculty or staff. Therefore, what changes are being made to improve integrity of administrators?
Hey, Kent, this is Mike Johnson. Can I take a crack at that?
Definitely can take a crack at that.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm the interim provost. And it's hateful to me to imagine that administration at any level is not held to the same standards as everyone else. It should never be the case. And I will tell you that the Board of Trustees has set up our system so that the compliance office is entirely independent, and it has a direct report to the Board of Trustees. One of the purposes of the integrity line, and the reason it was set up the way it is to ensure that we never end up in a situation like the Trevor Colburn Hall situation, where I think legitimately some subordinate staff people felt that they were at risk and had nowhere to turn to report apparent misbehavior by the superiors. If you contact the integrity line, and if it involves, say, me, the provost, it's going to get examined and it's going to get handled completely. I can say that with some assurance. You don't necessarily have a reason to believe me. You have to see these things play out to come to believe that that is the case. But please give it a shot if you see something like that. It's unbelievably important that integrity starts, right at the top, the president, the provost, the vice presidents, and everybody else. I'm grateful for the question. I hope whatever, misdeeds we've had in the past or lousy systems, we don't have them going forward. Thank you.
So there was a response in the chat that said that HR gets blamed for every time, and they feel that's the excuse for superiors as well. Anybody have thoughts about that? Learn from diversity and inclusion workshops. In addition to approaching your boss about this later in private, you could also turn to wonder and say something like, I wonder what brings you to that conclusion. So I think this person is providing maybe something that someone can do when somebody is acting out against them. And how does the university define diversity and inclusion? It seems diversity is mainly defined by a focus on race and not so much other diverse identifiers, such as social groups, age, gender, etc., as most of the past diversity breakfast speakers and presentations have been represented on race. So thoughts?
I think that Dr. Jones started off our panelist session by talking about intersectionality and talking about all the different identities we each hold. And I would like to believe that we think that diversity does include multiple identities. No one of us only has one thing that makes us who we are, makes us whole. And so all the parts of individuals are part of that. And that includes race and ethnicity, but also includes ability status, includes lots of other things that might be important as part of that. But it's not just one thing, in my opinion.
I will also say that, we also have to do an internal look in terms of how we see the world as well. And just because a person of color is the person who's the speaker doesn't mean that it's all about that person's ethnicity or their race. We have to open the door up to the fact that we all have our bailiwicks, right? We have the ability to do other things than just to sit and talk about our culture. But when we're asked to come and talk about that, sometimes the face of it is the people who have been marginalized, or who have been oppressed, who have been hurt, who can speak to these types of things. A lot of times it's because people who haven't been there won't speak to it or don't have the ability to speak to it because it's not in their wheelhouse. They don't have the understanding. And so that's why it's important to have the discussions and the conversations and to recognize that there is diversity and that when a person is coming to speak, they are speaking in most cases about their life experiences and they're putting their vulnerabilities on the plate so that everybody can have an opportunity to then dissect it. And so we dissect it and we dissect it and we dissect it without everybody else's opinions or voices at the table at the same time. And so what we really need to do is have difficult dialogues. And what this really talks to is us being able to sit down in small groups, in large groups, in any type of a venue, and really have the heartfelt conversations that are necessary to move the needle, right? Why do your benefits benefit you and not me or someone else? Or why don't we take this and look at it from a person who has who is working or living with a disability and take that and put that into the equation as well? What we don't typically do is we don't then take the message and then transfer it out to all other aspects of our life. And so then it seems like it's the person who is the messenger who this conversation is about. When I, as a Black man, speak about diversity and inclusion, I'm not speaking just for myself. And I'm not in this position just for myself. I'm here for my gay and lesbian brothers and sisters. I'm here for my Latino brothers and sisters, my Asian brothers and sisters. I'm here for everybody who needs somebody to be a voice for them. And that's typically why we have guest speakers who come to speak to this and bring the attention to this so that people can recognize that there's an issue here. And so we're focusing in on the presenter and not the issue. And I want to ask everybody to start thinking about the issue and how we can satisfy the needs of all by dealing with the exact issue and not the presenter of that issue.
I would also like to weigh in a little bit on that as well. It's important for all of us to also educate ourselves on what is being offered here at the University of Central Florida in the areas of diversity and inclusion. For example, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion holds more than just the diversity breakfast that many of us are familiar with. They also host Women's History Month activities as well on Equal Pay Day, etc. So there's a lot more that they do besides just that. So, and I think that the more we become educated and informed about what's going on in the different silos across campus, we'll come to the conclusion that diversity to the institution is not geared solely towards race. We also value and appreciate diversity of thought. We also have so many different panels and forums that are conducted on religion, LGBTQ+, and so many others. And then the Office of Diversity and Inclusion also collaborate with many other departments and divisions throughout the campus that support all of the demographics. And so important for us, I think, Dr. Butler, again, to educate ourselves on that. And you'll see that your needs are being met. If there's something that is not being met, though, we got to also hold ourselves accountable for informing and creating awareness to those of us that are in positions of authority that, hey, I feel like in this area, I'm not being represented or not being represented enough. So we can go back to the board and see how we can make that available for you, whether it's a program, event, or service. And so feel free to reach out to me at the conclusion of this if you feel that you're not being served, or if you want more information about what diversity and inclusion really means to us, and then we can support you that way.
Yeah, I had a conversation with one of my coworkers, Barbara Thompson, who we had the same conversation just the other day about, the messenger. And so we remember the things that we want to remember, but we don't remember other things. Like we don't remember that we had Peggy McIntosh here at the diversity breakfast who spoke. And she may have spoke about race and culture, but this was a white female who kind of talked about it from her lens. And so we have to also think about it from that perspective as well. And so I know that as an instructor, a lot of times people think that I'm only communicating about Black and white issues. I hear it from my students all the time, but you have to take me out of the equation and look at what the syllabus actually was dealing with throughout the whole 16 weeks. And not me as the messenger, but me as the person who's trying to give you information or impart information to you about a whole host of different things over the course of that semester's time. So let me move on to the next question here. A number of us are aware that administration is not held. Did I just read that one? Oh, wait. Why should faculty and staff respond to a survey when nothing will be changed? Staff is disposable. Minority staff is negligible, at least from the view of leadership. And the past town hall was filled with empty promises that weren't delivered on. So that speaks to change being slow. And I think that I would say that maybe that's part of the transparency that needs to happen with regards to what has happened or transpired since the last town hall meeting, and what the purpose of the action plan is moving forward. I think a lot of times people want immediate action on certain things, and there is a protocol. There's a way that we go about making things happen so that everybody can be satisfied. And as I think Dr. Rivera spoke to, everybody, we're not going to meet everybody's needs right off the bat. There are some people who are going to want things just like this, and there are people who understand that there's a process that needs to go through. I can't speak to empty promises. All I can speak to is that I'm doing this work every day. So if that's the case, and I'm doing this work every day, and I'm dealing with my emails, and I'm dealing with these meetings, and I'm dealing with all these other things, it doesn't seem like it's an empty promise to me. And so I have to now make it so that it's not an empty promise for you. And that's about making it more visible, making it be more tangible, so people can touch it and recognize that we are here trying our best to make the changes that are necessary.
Kent, I think Dr. Harrington had some comments that he wanted to
Sure.
make.
Dr. Harrington.
Thanks, and hello, everybody. And I'm sorry for the green cast. I've been trying to figure out why my webcam is turning me green this week. I have two different things to address. The first one is in the questions and in the comments that you've been reading. We've been hearing a lot about tension between faculty and staff and students, and particularly hearing from the USPS staff, which are the staff that are in generally the lower paid positions. There is a pending resolution that we passed in the Senate last year to create something we call the UCF Council, which is a table with basically all the stakeholders at the university there as equal people, equal partners. A different person runs it every month. It meets once a month. It includes the staff council president, the faculty president, the provost, the student government association president, the grad student association president, the chair of the board of trustees, a union representative. And the idea is simply to bring these issues up and get the merit out on the table, and to start looking, to bring them in the open. We have a council meeting, a staff council meeting, and they can talk about their problems. We have a faculty Senate meeting. We can talk about our council. We don't, our issues. We don't really have a place where we can talk to each other. And for an entity this big, I feel that we need something like that. The resolution is available on the Faculty Senate website. If you click on resolutions for last year, I think it's resolution number 24, but you can look for UCF Council. I don't know if the way we've laid it out there is workable, but the idea of getting a place to talk, I think, is very important for the health of this university. The other thing I have to say is completely unrelated. But Kent, this riffs on a conversation you and I had at the beginning of the summer. We were talking about systemic racism. Systemic racism it's a problem created by white guys, right? I mean, it's a problem created in the what we might call the dominant culture, and we're going to have to be a big part of that solution. And of course, the problem is that there are a lot of people who don't see it. They don't understand what it means quite in the same way as when I say systemic racism, they hear something differently from what I mean. And so my comment today is really a comment mostly to white guys. And that is, first of all, listen. Second of all, read. Third, ask questions. Then listen and read and ask some more questions. And when you think you're beginning to get it, if you think you understand what this is about, find a friend who doesn't and have a conversation with them and try to bring them to your understanding and listen to them and see if you can hear their understanding. This is not going to be solved by online training. It's not going to be solved by lecturing people. It's not going to be solved by policy. It's going to be solved by people reaching out to each other one-to-one in such a way that when you're done with the conversation, you're better friends than you were when you started.
Well, you know, we had this conversation. I think so many things around race and culture push us at odds against one another because it's really about positionality, right? And people feeling that, you know, I've earned what I have, and nobody's taking that away from anyone. I'm not taking away what you've earned, but what I'm telling you is that some of what you earned came at a cost to others who can't earn it. And so what are you doing, or what are we doing to kind of make sure that everybody has equal access, right? So this is not about leveling the playing field, because people seem to think that when we talk about leveling the playing field, that we're trying to give somebody an advantage that they shouldn't have. What I'm saying is that we all need to have equal access at the same rate and the same speed as anyone else, whether there's a white male or whether it's a white female, whether it's an Asian male, Asian female. It doesn't matter who the person is if what they have put their whole heart for in terms of the work that they're doing, the jobs that they are hoping to get, and things along those lines are what matter, and that they do that and they have just as much right and access to those things as anyone else. And so when we can come to the table and talk about how somebody else's privilege or implicit bias when it comes to hiring practices denies that to a group of people and why that happens, then we kind of move the needle a little bit, right? And so yes, it does take people to sit down and have these conversations. They're not easy conversations to have. I'm never going to sit here and tell anybody that to talk about race and culture and how people have been able to use advantages that are not open and available to everyone else is going to be easy, but the end of it all turns out to be so much better. It's one of the reasons why UCF is moving towards trying to make everybody feel as though they belong and that they're supposed to be here, and not just feel like it, but to know it, to actually know that they belong here. And that's the piece of the puzzle. And it's not to take anything away from anyone. It's to say to you, you know what? You have to start to think about how you have contributed to others not having access. And it's really important. So thank you for your words there, Dr. Harrington. There's a question I'm going to bring up here that talks about the budget. And it says, what specific budget actions does UCF have in mind to address this prominent issue that impacts the UCF A&P and staff? Raises did not occur in 2019 and 2020 is an unknown. I don't know how to read that. I'm missing the point and the end of that part, but I do know that money is being committed towards this action plan and to do work to kind of bring us together. But I think this question is actually talking about raises and things along those lines. So I'm not equipped to talk about raises. Is there someone here who can answer that part of the question? Okay. We will try to get back to you on the answer to that and respond to that. But I don't think that we have a panelist that's available to kind of speak to that question. And that kind of ends the questions that I'm seeing. Maybe I'm missing something in the chat, but if somebody has anything else, please put it in the chat and I'll be able to answer that. So to the Leadership Council, you've heard some of the questions that have come forward, and I'm wondering from your perspective, what's your 50% of this? What are you going to own with regards to some of the things you're hearing from the folks who have been on this call, and also from your take on the survey and the results from the survey? What do you think you have to contribute to this, to the changes that are necessary on our campus.
Dr. Butler, I just want to interrupt just for 1 second.
Sure.
There are a lot of questions in the Q&A section. I think you're looking at the questions to the panelists.
Yeah, they were providing me with questions. So.
Yeah, and so people are feeling like they're not being heard. And so I don't know if you can see that now.
No, I was actually answering questions that were given to me to say the next questions. I wasn't looking, so it's hard for me to look at all these different questions that are in the Q&A. I was being fed them, so I'm going to be honest about that, be transparent about that. And so is there a question that you saw that you would like to address next, Dr. Roberts?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I was just looking at one of the questions and one of the questions I kept hearing over and over again in the chat was why there's no USPS on the panel? And that is coming up over and over again. And so I do have to make the statement that many of us, and I can say myself as well, have been USPS here at the University of Central Florida. So we understand that experience. And I know that I have been USPS for a couple of years before I came into A&P. So even though it may appear that many of us now are in A&P positions, we have gone through that process and can speak to that. Also, in addition, I want to make you aware that on our Leadership Council for Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity, we do have USPS representation of that. Remember that today's forum is not focused on staff, etc. We do have a forum that's dedicated towards that, and you will be able to address questions and comments and concerns there, and we will have panel available for that. So I don't want you to feel as if we're overlooking you or we are not qualified to answer any questions regarding that, or that we don't care. We really do, and what you're saying is important to us, and so we're doing our best to answer that. So I just want to say that and to make you know and be aware that we haven't overlooked you in anything that we're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I will say that, you know, one of the things that also happened with this panel is we put a call out to the people who are in the Leadership Council to be here and be present, to be able to answer questions and things along those lines. So people's schedules didn't necessarily match up to be a part of this. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that the representation on the Leadership Council is varied. It's not just A&P. We do have people from all parts of the campus. We have students who are a part of that. And so, and this forum wasn't necessarily designed to answer questions. It was really to hear from individuals about what was coming up for them because of the survey. And so while I'm happy to kind of entertain the fact that USPS is not here in that type of a format, we're here to hear from people. And so that's loud and clear. We heard that you want that representation. We will do our best to make sure that's part of it. But I don't want us to get lost in that. I don't want us to really look at what we're here for. And it's really to talk about the climate here at the university. And if that is a part of that, is well noted, that USPS voices need to be heard and be a part of that. And it's being heard very loud and clear through the chat and through the Q&A at this particular point in time. Other thoughts?
Dr. Butler, there was a question in the Q&A section talking about that there was a lot of data indicated in the climate survey that people wanted some kind of formalized training around diversity. And some mandatory elements associated with diversity. And the question was, are there any long-term plans to implement this? Because I think you're good at answering that one.
Yeah, I can speak to that one. There are a lot of plans that are in play in terms of this. So the part of the action plan is to look at that. We're also looking at creating opportunities for staff members to be trained and faculty members to be trained in how to have these difficult dialogues and how to kind of be on the forefront of being there, right? When you see something, say something, and giving people the opportunities to recognize what that is and how to kind of recognize what microaggressions are. We're going to be doing trainings on those and how to kind of really put a more keener eye on implicit bias, especially when it comes to what's happening in search committees and things along those lines. I know just being here on campus, I've seen some things that have happened to individuals. And so it's really been up to me to say something, to speak out on those things that have happened. And I mean, I'm not at liberty to say what those things are, but I do know that I really appreciate every person that's on this campus. I treat every person that I come into contact with the same, no matter what their position is on this campus. And I think that that is as a part of what I hope that kind of can be seen here, is that I'm trying to be here for you all, and I want to be here for you all. So it makes important that you kind of take me up on that and make me accountable for the words that are coming out of my mouth. And so this is not just for us for show. This is really about us trying to make a change on this college campus. And so we have the action plan that's looking at that. We're looking at what those resources will look like in the different colleges and the different departments and units on campus. We're trying to make sure that the things that we can provide online, because we're in this pandemic, are made available for people to be able to do that. But the key is that it all is for us to have these dialogues and to see that these dialogues move towards action, and that it's not just us coming and having these conversations and nobody is able to kind of benefit from the things that are happening in the on our college campus. Go ahead, Jeff. Oh, you didn't have anything? All right, so I'm reading this last thing here. We are also getting questions related to hiring more diverse employees. And so the next question goes, does UCF have a faculty diversity recruitment policy and or program in place? And so with that, I think that's part of the things that we are working on. And I would turn that over to Jenna. She might be able to answer that question better than I can.
So the university follows the Office of Institutional Equity's plan for hiring for recruitment. There are certain federal guidelines we have to follow. What we're trying to do is make it, I guess, clearer to search committees what this recruitment process looks like to develop a diverse pool, talk about things like active recruitment. We are developing templates for job position announcements that are inclusive, so that we get a very diverse pool in terms of our hiring. But Dr. Butler, if I could, there's actually another question that's sort of in there. And the question is, there are a large number of Black and Hispanic staff members in the position of coordinators and lower, and there are very few pathways for promotion for them. When an admin position opens, it's usually filled in with a white person without true evaluation of all who apply. And I guess I would say to the person who asked that question, if you do believe there's something that is inappropriate with the hiring process, the Office of Institutional Equity is the office who actually investigates that. They will look into any searches to make sure they are followed all the processes, followed all the rules, and conducted an appropriate search with a diverse pool. So that is something that if it is a concern, they are very open. They do lots of investigations just to kind of check to make sure searching is adequate and appropriate. So I just wanted to make sure that was known to that person.
Yes, it's important. And, you know, again, so often in isolation, we don't see these things. And I think Dr. Roberts talked about us being in our silos and not recognizing that. I know that I've taken an opportunity to look through our websites and look at different leadership patterns that are in different offices and who's in those positions and things along those lines. And I think that that's a telling story, right? That's one of the reasons why recruitment and retention is important, and things to be kind of paying attention to, is because people may not even be attracted to UCF because of what they're seeing in our leadership and things along those lines. And so how do we kind of change that? And how we change that is by proactively looking at that. And so right now, in this moment in time, you know, people may say, okay, we're putting too much emphasis on this. But the fact of the matter is the emphasis is there because we have been lacking. We have not taken the opportunity to speak out against the fact that we aren't being diverse in our hiring practices. And we have to also recognize that when we hire individuals, we're hiring them because they have the expertise, not because of who they are or what they represent. And that we have to start to embrace that. Because a lot of times we don't embrace that. We say we only brought this person here to fill a quota. And personally, I don't want to be seen as someone's quota when I know that I worked hard to be here. And so I think that just like anyone else wants to feel proud of their endeavors and the things that they have done, I, as a Black man, want to feel the same way, that, you know, I am being valued because I bring something to the table, and that that others who look like me or who don't look like me are valued for what they bring to the table, not because they were brought here to fill a quota. It's kind of demeaning to think of that as the only reason why I would be on the college campus. And so those are the things that we have to have conversations about and talk about as we move forward. We are actually coming to the end of our time. I have us at 4:59. At 4:55, I was supposed to start concluding this thing, and I'm going to try to do that now. So I want to thank you all for the time that you have spent here with us today, listening. We're going to try to continue to have these conversations, and it's about having conversations. It's not about us having all of the answers. I don't want to come here and let you think that I have all of the answers. I get the answers, and I can come to answers when I hear from all the voices, and we are all sitting around and figuring out how to make this work and how to make this move forward. And so the conversations that we're going to have with faculty next week and with staff next week and with students in September is really about how we can move this all forward. It's all going into the action plan. And so I don't want anybody to feel as though this has been lip service and that we've done this and it's not going anywhere. And so we're going to be much more visible with our outpouring of actions so that you see it and that it's transparent, and that you don't feel as though we are just kind of having these things to fall on deaf ears. As I said earlier, President Cartwright's here, Provost Johnson is here. We have members throughout the community who are listening in. I had a conversation a week or so ago with deans and chairs and other unit leaders about this. This is on our radar. This is not something that's falling by the wayside. We are taking this momentum of this moment and we are moving forward. And I would hope that what you felt was happening 20 years ago that didn't make a change is not going to be the same thing that you saw happen in 2020. And so we are really moving forward with this initiative to help this university be all that it has said it was going to be, live up to its creed. And so thank you again. There will be a link to the climate survey reports that will give you a little bit more graphics to this. And you can also watch the recording on the YouTube as well. And so again, thank you. Thank you to my panelists. Thank you to those who work behind the scenes. You don't know how much goes into this work to make sure that we can kind of be broadcasting to you all. And I think you all have just done your share to kind of make this happen. And I appreciate you for it. I look forward to seeing you all next week. And at this time, I'm just going to close out and wish you all a very phenomenal rest of your day.